You're still getting coffee, go ahead and still get coffee. You don't have to come right back in to the big area here. We are trying to improve the coffee area a little bit all the time. We garage saled, yard saled some stuff we thought would look good back there. Hopefully at a point we'll get some drywall up and it'll look like a little coffee shop, which I think is great because I really need coffee in the morning, and I think many of you do too. We have an early service, so that'll be super helpful. Hey, we're in the middle of a series called 7 Deadly Scapegoats. 7 Deadly Scapegoats here at Eastpoint, and the tagline for the series is 7 Deadly Scapegoats that keep us from being who we know we're supposed to be and from doing what we know we're supposed to do, because most of the time when you look back and you've done something that you kind of wish you hadn't done, like a regret that you have, you think, I sort of knew what I was supposed to do. There was something, if I would have listened, or there was something I said, I really knew. On some level I knew, but I just didn't do what I knew I was supposed to do. I wasn't who I knew I was supposed to be in that moment. And the scapegoat, we've defined it just for the purposes of our series here as whoever or whatever takes the heat when you fail. So whatever you fail at, all of us have failed at something. I failed at plenty of things in my short life, but all of us have failed at something. And the difference between looking back and saying, oh, it was really because of this other factor over here, this person, oftentimes, this whole group of people should take the heat for everything that happened to me in that situation. It was not my fault. Versus something that we're going to study in this series, which hopefully will be a little more of a helpful response. And don't forget, we introduced last week the but-I test. And the but-I test is if you're analyzing a situation and you knew what you were supposed to do, but at the end of what you were supposed to do, there's a but-I. Like, I know you asked me to clean my room, but I had friends over and they're the ones who messed it up. Or I know that you asked me to do the dishes, but I'm germophobic, so I don't touch dirty things, or whatever it is, I've tried them all, believe me. The but-I is a clue that you're scapegoating someone or something else for your failure. And we don't want to do that. We don't want to fail anymore. We want to become better people. So we're going to look at 7 deadly scapegoats that correspond, in case you're interested in this kind of stuff, they correspond to the 7 deadly sins. That's what makes the title so original and creative. Okay. My production team should be happy about that. Original and creative titles. But first, before we get into the verse for today, I want to tell you something about myself, because I once read a book that said if you're talking to people, you should tell them something about yourself. So something about me is that we moved to Coldwater last fall. We moved onto Washington Street and we bought a house which we really liked a few things about. And there's a lot of potential in this place. So we bought it based on a lot of potential that we saw. We bought it based on basically square footage for the price that we paid. And we thought, we're kind of, my wife's a super handy person. I don't know if she's here in the room today, if she's downstairs with the kids, but my wife she's back there. She's a super handy person. In fact, one of the things that impressed me most about her was her ability to renovate houses when we first met, because she, really, seriously, when we got married, she had already bought a house and moved out, and she was living on her own, and she had photo albums, like, look at the drywall I put up, and look at the floors I refinished, and I'm sitting there thinking, this is perfect, She's amazing. I don't know how to do any of that stuff. So we moved into this house, and I knew my wife could do a lot of these things, and I thought, I can learn how to do stuff, and so we got this place, and we're renovating, and in the process of renovating, we make a lot of choices, and one of the things I've seen in other people's houses that was kind of cool is people that have like a Bible verse on different walls in their houses, like every room has a different Bible verse on the wall. And ultimately, we didn't decide to do this, but I got the idea to do that from a conference that I went to, and a guy got up and talked about how they put Bible verses in all different rooms of their house, and I thought, that's kind of cool. But I didn't like the choices the speaker at the conference made about which Bible verses they picked. I thought I could do better than that. So I thought of some, even though we didn't do it, I thought of some that I thought would be good. The verse that this particular guy picked for the living room I thought was really good. I just kept it. The living room verse that he put up was, let your conversation be always full of grace. Isn't that just a great verse for your living room as you sit down and talk and you're just reminded that your conversation should be full of grace, not like bickering and arguing, but nice and gracious. And so it's perfect for the living room, a good room to talk in. For the kitchen, I thought, just for Sarah, I thought, wouldn't it be cool to have this verse, Psalm 128:2, you shall eat the fruit of the labor of your hands. Isn't that great? So you're working on the food and you're making it and you look up and say, eventually I'm going to get to eat this. This just makes sense. It's very practical. For the dining room, my kids sometimes have trouble eating the food we give them, so this is the one I wanted. If you're willing and obedient, you'll eat the fruits of the land. It's kind of implied if you're not obedient, you can go to bed without any food. Okay, you didn't get it. But before we put the next one up, I want to tell you that this one, there's so many verses I could have picked for the kids' room, but this is the one. This is the one I would have settled on for my kids, and you might not have picked the same one for your kids, but this is if I were going to put a Bible verse that my kid would see every day when they wake up in the morning and before they go to sleep, it will be this one, Proverbs 10:21. Fools die for lack of sense. Fools die for lack of sense. Some people will put verses about how God loves little children, or like obey your parents. And maybe years ago I would have picked that before I had the kids that I have. But now if they could remember one verse for their whole life, fools die for lack of sense. Because sometimes this kid, the things he says to me, I actually have said this. I said, Ruin, if you go out and say the same thing you just said to me to anybody else, they're going to punch you in the mouth. You go out, just run out and say to one of the other little kids, go say that to one of the Muslim kids on our street. They'll punch you in the mouth. Anyone would. They'll just punch you right in the mouth. You're going to lose your teeth. And you won't be able to eat food anymore. And the dining room verse won't apply to you. You can't talk to people that way. If you talk to a police officer that way, you're going to go to prison. If you're lucky. I've seen some scary stories on my news feed. You might not make it to your next birthday. You're not going to get that Lego Star Wars thing if you're dead. Fools die for lack of sense. That's what I want my kids to know. But this also happens to be a great verse that talks about when we do things that don't make any sense. Like when someone's just being an idiot. So this is, I have a list of these things. But first, I just want to show this. I have a goat. This is our first scapegoat. Our first of the 7 deadly scapegoats is people who just don't have any sense. Everybody's met someone at some point in your life where you've seen somebody who just doesn't have any sense. So our first scapegoat is these idiots that just don't have any sense, okay? So a scapegoat, we scapegoat these people and we call them idiots. And we'll learn by the end that this may not be the best thing to do, but we do this. We look at people and say, those idiots, they ruined my day, this idiot. And so I thought the best way to introduce or remind you maybe of some things that you've seen or heard about that people do that are just stupid is this list of headlines from the news. So these aren't going to be up there. I'm just going to read them out. If you want to go find some funny headlines about people who do stupid things, just go to Google News and type in a search for Florida man. That's all you got to do. Florida man. So here's the 4 that I found just last night. Florida man paints his name on cop cars, gets arrested. Okay? He's an idiot. Florida man arrested after attempting to carjack unmarked police cruiser with 2 police inside. Florida man tasered by cop after aggressively walking towards him, yelling about police car lights. Florida man suspected of stealing a Mercedes-Benz chewed off the tips of his fingers to avoid being fingerprinted. Because nothing screams I'm innocent like chewing off your fingertips. So these are just examples. These are all things we've heard about, stuff like this, and maybe we've seen things like this happen, or we know people like this that just seem to do the dumbest things, and we put them on television and we laugh at them and we say, oh, these people are so dumb. But here's an interesting Bible verse, because this is something that pervades our culture. You go on the internet, this happens all the time. Everybody's calling each other idiots, and this is, we mock people, and sometimes it's lighthearted. You mock politicians are free game. I mean, but like, there's this attitude that we have, like, it's just okay to put down people, make fun of people because they're dumb, they do dumb things, or idiots. And Jesus says something about this that should give us a little bit of pause, and should tell us, hey, when you do that, okay, when you call someone else an idiot, when you say, hey, oh, that person is whatever, when you do that, there's something else going on that you need to be aware of, and you need to think about. And so here's what he says. Here's what Jesus says about calling people stupid. Jesus says, you've heard, okay, so I'll just back up a little bit. Keep it up here. Jesus is talking to his disciples, and he's trying to get them to understand a few things, okay? One of the things he's trying to get them to understand is they have a ton of rules that God gave them that are good, and they're wonderful. And one of the rules that God gave is don't murder, like don't kill people. We're about to read that one. But what Jesus wants to do is he wants to show his followers, his disciples, that hey, there's a little bit more to this commandment than maybe you thought. I mean, maybe you thought that all God meant was as long as you go through your life and you never physically murder somebody, then you're golden, you fulfilled the entire intent of what God has asked you to do when he said that. But Jesus is trying to reveal there's something deeper going on here, and he tries to close some loopholes. He tries to get people to be saying, there's this, okay, you shouldn't murder, but there's more to it than that. There's something else going on in the heart of somebody, in other words, that does that you don't want to be going on in your heart. You don't even want to go there. You want to stay far away from it. So here's some advice for someone who thinks that all they have to do is all that matters is that if they never kill anybody and they fulfill the commandment. So here we go. You've heard that it was said to the people long ago, the Jewish people at Mount Sinai, if you know the story, in the book of Exodus, they received 613 commandments from God, and he's one of them. You shall not murder, and anyone who murders will be subject to judgment. I think this is interesting because a lot of people look at the Old Testament law and think well, do not murder, and there's a death penalty for murder in the Old Testament. A lot of people look at that and think, anyone who murders, they're free game. Anyone could just go kill them in the Old Testament. But that's not how it worked. What Jesus says here is very specific. They're subject to judgment. In other words, they're going to be taken before a court of law and tried, and there's witnesses, much like we have today, and there's justice is done. And maybe they get off, or maybe they're guilty or whatever, but the court has to decide. So that's Jesus is saying. So if you kill somebody, you go to the court and they see if you're guilty, and you're liable to be judged if you kill somebody. It's very simple. Everyone understands this. But he keeps going. But I tell you that anyone who is angry with a brother or sister will be subject to judgment. This is not your biological brother or sister. All right, yeah. But it includes your biological brother or sister. Oh, man, okay. So this, in Jesus' immediate context, he's talking to the Jewish people, so it's them and other Jews. But we're also called brothers and sisters. If you read the whole New Testament, we're called brothers and sisters if you're a Christian, if you're a believer. All right? So if you're not a believer, you're here for the first time, church for the first time, or just hanging out, maybe not first time, but haven't decided yet what you believe about Jesus, the language here clues you in that you're not on the hook for this. God's not expecting you to take on this. He's not putting, I don't know, I know you don't believe in me, but here's all the things you gotta do. That's not what I'm saying. So if you're not already invested, you're not a Jesus person, all right, you don't have to follow what Jesus is saying here. I think you probably should, and I invite you to try it because I think it'll change your life. But I'm not saying you have to do this, okay? So don't take it that way. But if you're angry with a brother or sister, you'll be subject to judgment. Now, when Jesus talks about murder and being brought before court, it's obvious to us. The first thing we think is, yeah, you go to court. The police come and get you, and they try you, and you're in a real physical court. But there's no court for people who are just angry, is there? There's no human court on earth where you go. There's no anger police that come and get you when you're mad at somebody and take you away and try you before a court. That doesn't happen. Wouldn't it be crazy if that happened? It doesn't happen. So Jesus is talking about a different kind of judgment here. And Jesus is talking about a judgment that as Christians we believe will happen after we die. So after you die, you go to heaven or whatever, and God plays like a VHS tape of all the things that you've ever done, and you have to answer for it. And God judges you, and you see he weighs all the things you've done, and you have to explain them to him. So you're being judged. If you're angry with a brother or sister, if you're angry with your fellow Christians, you have to answer for that at the judgment. You're going to have to answer, this is why I was angry. Let me explain to you why it was okay that I was angry in that situation. And this seems a little bit extreme. And this is where we go back to this whole thing. I talked about this a couple of weeks ago. A lot of people think that this is so hard, it's actually too hard, and you're not even supposed to try to do this. Who could go through their whole life without being angry? Even the nicest little old lady gets angry sometimes at something or other, It's just you can't go through your whole life. This is too hard. He sets the bar so high, there's no point in even trying. But that's not my theology at all. I think that we're about to find out that there's a really good reason that you should avoid being angry with people. But let's go on. Again, so he's repeating sort of the same thing again. Anyone who says to a brother or sister, raka, this is a word that's not an English word, and we can just put it as an insult here. Anyone who says to his brother or sister, you're an idiot, will be answerable to the court. Again, a heavenly court, the court that happens after you die and you have to answer for all your sins. And finally, anyone who says, you fool! That episode of Hollywood Squares, anyone ever see that with Gilbert Gottfried? You fool? Oh man, it comes to my head every time I see this verse. You've all missed out. Anyone who says, you fool, will be in danger of the fire of hell. Like, this gets worse and worse and worse. You're in danger if you're calling people idiots and fools. And remember, our whole culture does this. Like, YouTube, the whole idea, the whole appeal of YouTube is in the comments, you just call people names. Like, that's the thing that we do. We call people names on the internet and in real life and on television and in political debates. Oh my goodness. But if you do that, if you call someone a fool or an idiot or you're angry with them, you're liable to some kind of punishment or judgment. Now, here's a question I had after reading this passage. Why does Jesus connect these three things? Being angry, calling someone a name, and killing them. So it seems like you could sort of see how the first two go together because you're really mad at someone, you might call them a name. But how does the last one fit in? Like, how is that even logically connected? Like, if you're mad at somebody and you're calling him a name, does that mean that you're like, what? Why is he even connected to the sin of murder? Why is he connecting these two things? And I think you can, there's an easy one. Here's an easy answer. Like, if you're mad at someone, you've started down like some kind of emotional path, and at the end of the path is murder. But I don't think that's good enough. So I think we're gonna unpack this a little bit further this morning. But first, we're going to say something that I think we all know, okay? We have to start at a different place, and we'll get back here in just a second. But I want to start with something that everybody knows. Here's what I think you already know about yourself, and you obviously know it about other people too. You've seen this. You know that your anger, and my anger, and our anger, is unproductive, and you know that it's harmful, right? Like, when you look back at situations where you've gotten really angry, and whatever that anger has caused you to do, whatever it is, even if it's a little thing, big thing, whatever, usually, for most of those situations, you don't look back and think, I'm so glad that I got so mad, and I'm really satisfied and happy with everything that I did in that situation. That was the right thing to do. It was not a mistake, and it was 100% correct, okay? Most of us, most of the times we've been angry, there may be exceptions you could think of, but most of us, most of the times we've been angry, the things that we do are unproductive, and they're harmful. When we get mad, we lash out and we harm people, and usually the next day or 2 days later, we look back and say, okay, how am I going to fix this? How am I going to fix? I just yelled at my wife, and the next day you're thinking, I still got to live with her. Like, how am I going to fix this? I was unproductive. It didn't accomplish what I wanted it to. I didn't win an argument. I didn't get what I wanted. And beyond that, it was harmful. I hurt somebody, and I hurt myself. I'm hurt. I feel bad now. Anger, we know this, everybody knows this. Anger is unproductive and harmful. Just getting everybody on the same page here. I don't think that you're learning something new by telling you this. Here's another thing I think you know. I think that you know that you've also made mistakes that only afterward, only in hindsight, you look at it and say, oh, that was a mistake. If I'd have known it was a mistake while I was doing it, I wouldn't have made it. But now, looking back, I know that was a mistake. Everybody has these things. Everybody's done this, where you look back at some point in your life and you realized that in that situation, you were the idiot, okay? I think everybody can look back at a certain situation, even just one in your life, and think, yep, in that situation, just then, maybe that's the only time in my life I've ever been the idiot, but in that situation, I was totally the idiot. And the reason I know this is because all of us have been children, and all of us have been teenagers. Nothing against teenagers. In fact, teenagers, I would never call you an idiot. I don't think that you're idiots. All I'm saying is that 10 years from now, you're going to look back at you presently, and you're going to think, okay? If your parents were videotaping everything that you do now, and they were to show it to people 10 years from now, you would ask them not to. I mean, that's just, you would. Just like you asked them not to show your significant other, boyfriend, girlfriend, videos from you 10 years before now, because that's embarrassing. You'll ask your parents not to show those videos to your significant other 10 years from now of who you are now. Because you're going to look back, and I know this because I look back at teenage me, and I think, okay, yeah, I was kind of an idiot. I did some stupid things, I said some stupid things, I have a lot of regrets, and I don't think I could have done that much better. Like, I'm not saying that you're all failing. I think you're probably really successful. You're here in church. I mean, that's great. You've got something going for you. But just future you is going to look back, and here's what you're going to say. Here's what it boils down to. They're going to say, if I knew then what I know now, I would have acted differently. If I knew then what I know now, I would have acted differently. And for all the rest of us, it doesn't matter how old you are, you're probably going to look back 10 years from now. You're going to look back at who you are today, and you're saying, you know what? If I knew then what I know now, I would have acted differently. I would have done something different, because in some situation that I was in back then, I was just an idiot. I just didn't see the whole picture. I wasn't thinking. I wish I would have, but I wasn't. And in some situation, I made a fool of myself. I did something that now I regret. And this is everybody. This happens to everybody. I think Taylor Swift said it best. When you're 15 and somebody tells you they love you, you're going to believe them. You know, that's just the way that it is when you're a teenager. So you look back and you think, I would have done something different. You look back at 10 years ago you, no matter how old or how young you are, and you think this. But here's the thing. We all have made these mistakes. We all know it. We all have been in these situations. And we know, here's what we know, and here's what you wish someone would have done for you at that age. You wish someone would have found a gentle way, someone who already had the wisdom you have now, a gentle way to connect with you and empathize with you and say, I know what it's like, I know what you're going through, I know how it feels when you see him, when you see her, I know how it feels in school, you know, day after day, I know what you're thinking, I know what you're feeling, I understand. Here's some wisdom. Here's what I would, if I knew when I was a teenager everything I know now, here's what I would have done in your shoes. Here's what I would do. You don't have to do it, you don't have to listen, but here's what I would do if I could do it all over again. And the older you get, the more that you wish that when you were younger, someone would have done this for you, would have given you the leg up, would have empathized with you and said, I understand, but here's something that will help you, okay? And we know this. We know we've made mistakes, and we know that what we wanted was someone to help. But here's what we do. Instead of doing that for the people around us who are making fools of themselves, we scapegoat them. We say, I know I should empathize with them, but I would never do something that stupid. I know that I should help people. I know that I made mistakes, but I would never do something that stupid. And this is why we have the Florida Man headlines. There's whole websites just for these Florida Man headlines. And what we do is we find these people that do things that are dumber than we think is the dumbest thing we've ever done, and we scapegoat them. And we say, I understand empathy and connecting with people and helping people is what I need to do. And I understand that when I'm angry, that's not helpful or productive. I understand that people make mistakes. But I would never do something that stupid. I would never do something that stupid. And here's the hypocrisy of that statement, I think, is most obvious in politics. Because we get angry at politicians for doing things that we think are stupid. And we think, but what are we thinking? When we say that, when we're angry and we say, I would never do something that stupid, what we're saying is, if they were to put me in charge of everything, I would do a better job than these people who made it a career. And maybe you would, and some of you are politicians, some of you should do that. But if it's just anger, if it's coming from a place of anger, and you're just mad, it's unproductive, and it's unhelpful. Here's what I wrote. And I think this is true. I really think this is true. I think that anger is a vaccine for empathy. I think that anger is a vaccine, a preventative for empathy. Because as soon as anger finds its way into a situation, as soon as anger finds its way into a relationship, as soon as your decisions, your thoughts, and your actions are driven towards somebody by anger, you're not going to empathize with them. You're not going to put yourself in their shoes. You're not going to ask what is motivating them. Like, that whole process requires a whole ton of brain power and like the big part of your brain. And when you're mad at someone, you're using the tiny brain that's right above your spinal cord that just has basic emotions. You're not thinking with your whole head, and you make decisions that you regret later on. But as soon as anger enters in, you lose the opportunity to empathize with someone. You lose the opportunity to connect with someone. You're just their enemy now, and they're your enemy, and it's a fight. And you never win a fight. You never win an argument. It just never works that way. I think this is why Jesus connects anger and name-calling and all that goes with that with murder. Because the only way that you can get to the point where you could end somebody's life is if you have zero empathy for them. You have nothing. You feel nothing for them, but hatred and anger. And when you're mad at someone, there's no pity, there's nothing. That's the path that you start down when you're angry with someone. You close off the relationship. And at the same time, and this is what's so insidious, at the same time, they get all the blame. You scapegoat idiots, and we all do this. We scapegoat people who we think are idiots for our anger. And that's one of the 7 deadly sins. If you know the 7 deadly sins, wrath, anger is one of them. And one of the reasons it's so deadly is because it blinds us to what we're doing. Think about it. Think about the things that you've done that you regret. If you would have been thinking with your whole head, if you would have stopped and thought through all the logical implications of what you were doing, and you would have really thought and not felt but thought more, you would have done something different. Anger is one of those things that shuts down all the thinky parts of your head, so you can't even go down those pathways. You lose the ability to make informed decisions. You lose the ability to be helpful. You lose it. And the most insidious thing about it is the very thing that causes you to do something you regret is the thing that causes you from keeping you from seeing what you're even doing in that moment. The anger does it all for you. It's like another person comes out. Now, for some of you, this is uncomfortable because I've just described your home life. I've just described the way you interact with your wife, your husband, your parents, your children. And somebody's always angry at your house. And for some of you, this is your work life. And for some of you, this is how it is at school. You're always mad, or there's people around you who are always mad. They're just angry. And you've seen over and over again that it's not helpful, but you just feel trapped in this cycle to where someone's mad, and there's this, you get mad, and then they get mad, or he gets mad, and she gets mad, and there's just they never connect, they never meet in the middle because there's always anger, and the anger keeps them from empathy. It keeps them from putting themselves in the other person's shoes. And if you can't break out of that cycle, it'll never happen. Because anger will keep it from happening. You get to the point where you just see somebody and you're mad already. If a relationship is characterized by anger, you get to a point where you just can't even see them. You're already mad. You lose. You cut it off. There's no opportunity for reconciliation at that point. So what do you do? What can you do in that situation? We'll get to it. But first I want to talk to the leaders. I want to talk to everyone who's in charge of somebody. All the parents, all the teachers, all the bosses. Okay? So if you're not in charge of somebody, you can tune out for the next few minutes here. Unless you think someone might eventually trust you with any kind of responsibility, then you might want to tune in, get a leg up. But all the leaders, here's something I've realized. There's actually someone told me. If you're a leader, if you're a parent, and you're always angry at your children, and you scapegoat your children for all of the dysfunction in your house because they're out of control, or if you're a supervisor or a boss, and things are just not going the way that you want them to at work, you're not meeting whatever deadlines, numbers, whatever it is, and you scapegoat the people who work for you, and you blame the people who work for you, and you're angry with the people who work for you, or the people that you supervise. Or if you're a teacher or a leader of any kind, and you've got followers or people who are under you, and it's their fault, and you're angry with them, okay? I get that. I've been mad at my kids. I've been mad at people I'm supposed to lead, but here's what happens. When you blame your followers, when you blame the people who you're responsible for, you abdicate leadership. You abdicate leadership in that situation. If it's not your fault, then you're not the leader. If the tone of communication in your house, and you're a parent, if the tone of communication in your house is anger, and it's frustration, and it's discord, and it's disorganized, and it's not your fault, then you're not the leader. If there's nothing you can do about it, and it's all the kids' fault, then you're not in charge of your house. They're in charge. If it's their responsibility to fix the problem, then they're the leaders. They're in charge. If it's your employee's responsibility to fix the systemic problem at your workplace, then they're the leaders. They're the boss. It's not you anymore. You abdicate that. You abdicate leadership in your classroom, in your family. If it's all of a sudden it's not your fault, it's the fault of the people, and you're just angry. You're just angry with the people that you're responsible for. And you don't want to abdicate leadership, right? So what's the alternative? What do you do? Here's my suggestion. I got two questions that I think that we can ask ourselves, and I'm going to do this too. We can ask ourselves, and by the way, you can't wait until you're angry to do this, because once you're angry, the empathy's gone, and you've put up a roadblock, and it's not going to come down until you cool down. So maybe you got to go cool down and come back and ask some questions. First question: am I about to become someone else's scapegoat? Am I about to do something that I'm going to look back and say, you know what, I was the idiot in that situation? Am I about to do something that's going to provoke someone else in my family, my workplace, my classroom, whatever it is, going to provoke them to something that is going to make them angry? And then they're going to make me more angry. I'm going to make them more angry. But the whole time, they're going to scapegoat me. They're going to say, oh, my teacher, my boss, my dad's an idiot. Just yells at his kids. Who yells at a kid? They doesn't do anything, Just a kid. They're going to scapegoat you. You don't want to be the scapegoat for someone else's anger. You don't want to be the scapegoat for someone else's bad decision. You don't want to enable the people in your life to do dumb things that they're going to regret by doing dumb things that you're going to regret. So ask yourself the question, before you start to feel it rising up, you're a little irritated, you just take a deep breath, count to 10, whatever you need to do, go walk away and think and come back and say, look, is what I want to do going to make me the scapegoat for someone else's dumb and bad and stupid and foolish decision? Am I about to be the idiot? Am I going to write a story that they're going to tell other people and I'm the bad guy in the story? And is it going to be, it's not even going to be helpful because I'm just mad, and when I'm mad, I'm not helpful. I'm just harmful. Second question, and this requires a little more thought, but as you engage the thinky parts of your brain, it's because I said they're mutually exclusive. You can't think rationally and be angry. Okay? So this can work both ways. If you're angry, there's no way for you to think rationally, but if you can get your brain thinking rationally, there's no way for you to be angry. Okay, it's almost like two different systems in your brain. When one starts up, the other one shuts down, okay? So if you're angry and your rational thinking is about to shut down, engage it. Engage the rational thinking part of you to do math problems. I don't care what you got to do. But engage the thinking part of your brain, and you won't be able to be angry because you're too busy thinking. And thinking is helpful, and thinking is productive. And here's one of the things you can think about. What possible reason could somebody have just for doing something so stupid? And I don't know what the reason is, or I would tell you, there's people have tons of reasons for doing things that you'll look back on and say, that was dumb. The guy who chewed his fingers off, he had a reason. While he was doing that, it seemed like the right thing to do. As hard as it is for us to imagine that, as hard as it is for us to put ourselves in his shoes, your kids, every time they do something, they break a rule. They got a reason for it. Maybe like last week, they just felt compelled, okay? But there's a reason. There's something going on in their head. There's something that's compelled them to do that. And if you can figure it out, if you can ask the question, and maybe talk to the person you're about to become angry with and ask them the question, hey, I noticed this happened. Can you help me understand why it happened? Help me understand why it turned out this way. Help me understand why the whole team didn't meet their numbers. Help me understand why when I teach you talk over me and you don't. Just help me understand. I'm not even mad. I just want to know why. I just want to understand. Help me understand you. So you're thinking, so you're not going to get angry. And you might actually get to the root of the problem, and you might help somebody solve something that's going on in their life. Sometimes you won't be able to. I have a whole list of answers to this question for bad drivers that I see around town. Like people who drive real fast, cut me off, or drive real slow, or the car is super loud at 2 in the morning, or whatever it is. I have a whole list. Maybe someone's giving birth in the back seat. Someone is delivering a baby in the back seat, and they have to get to a hospital, and there's a hospital in that direction somewhere. Or it's an undercover police car, and there's a crime that they're going to go stop. There's something. I got a whole list, and I go through until I find one that fits. If there's no one in the back seat, and it's a truck, and there's no one in the passenger seat, the driver's giving birth. And it's even more important that they get to the hospital. And if it's a man, then it's his wife or something. Something's, I would only do that if it were an emergency. Maybe it's an emergency. Maybe I shouldn't be angry. Maybe I shouldn't call names. Maybe I should ask the question, am I about to become, is this going to be so distracting that I'm going to be a bad driver and someone behind me is going to scapegoat me for their anger, their bad decision? And what possible reason could someone have for doing what they've done? And if you can ask these two questions before you get angry, before you feel, and maybe your marriage is at the point where it's just about to break. And maybe it's already broken and it's done, there's nothing you can do. But maybe there is hope, and maybe it's just about to break, and all you need to do is when you feel the anger, you need to find a way to engage the rational part of your brain and start asking these questions. Am I about to do something that's going to give him an excuse for bad behavior? Am I going to be their scapegoat? And what's the reason that they're acting this way? Why do they do what they do? And not sarcastically, but for real. Try to find the answers to those questions. And if you can do this, This is the tool that will help you. Jesus said, if you call people names and you're always angry, you're in danger of judgment. If you're a Christian, that's serious business. And if you're not a Christian, this could be serious business in your life. If you believe you'll never meet God after you die, if you believe nothing happens after you die, you can still have happier, more productive, more helpful, and better relationships if you can learn to ask these questions when you feel yourself getting angry. But if you're a Christian, God's going to ask you every time you got angry, why was it justified here? Why was it justified here? Why did you abdicate leadership here? Why did you, the responsibility I gave you as a parent or as a teacher, as a boss, why did you toss that just for some excuse to get angry? And if you're a believer, if you're a Jesus person, that's a serious thing. You want to answer as few of those questions as possible. So Jesus tells you. He just tells you. He gives you the hints. He gives you part of what it means to have better relationships, to keep yourself from those negative emotions, to be able to have empathy, keep yourself from anger, one of the 7 deadly sins. And if you find yourself angry and all that comes out is a but I, or a but he, or a but she, or a but, calm down, turn that off, stop scapegoating, look at yourself and say, what am I about to do? Am I going to be someone's scapegoat? And 2, what's the reason? What possible reason could they have? Don't be angry. Don't shut off your empathy. Don't shut off your rational brain. It's one of the greatest gifts God has given us is our thinking, our ability to think and process and wonder and dream. And I want you to think about what your family, think of it just for a second, think for a second what your family would look like if nobody got angry. Think about what it would look like. Maybe this is a fantasy. Maybe this seems so far from the current reality, but think about what it would look like if in your family nobody was angry, because you can get it partway there if you're never angry. Right? Think about what your workplace, your classroom, think about what these places, these environments, your church, small group, whatever it is, think about what it would look like if nobody was ever mad at each other. And you think that's why I want them to spray Prozac from airplanes. But there's a better way, and there's a more realistic way to get to that point. And part of it is you. Part of it is you saying, this is, if I cannot be angry in this situation, there's at least one person who's thinking. And maybe I'll be the only one, but at least one person is not going to be a scapegoat. At least one person. And maybe it can be you. Let's pray. Father in heaven, I thank you for your word. I thank you for your son Jesus, for his wisdom, for your wisdom that he's given to us. I thank you for helping us understand the connection between our anger and the shutting off of our empathy valve, the inability to connect with and the inability to feel sorrow or love or pity for somebody. Help us to see when we're about to become angry. Help us to remember these questions. Am I about to become somebody's scapegoat? And what reason could this person have for acting this way? Help us to remember that if we can answer these questions, we can be the people that you've asked your followers to be, people who don't get angry, but people who help, people who are empathetic. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, have fun at the fair. Come back next week for the next of the deadly sins and deadly scapegoats.